Bam.
Hey, this is Boone Cutler, and you're watching the Break It Down show.
Just a couple of dudes talking. Just a couple of dudes that have been in a lot of crazy places and done a lot of crazy things talking. Like this is so here's why I'm bringing Boone on the show. Boone and I have some very unique experiences. We've done some incredibly crazy things along the way, and it gives us a unique perspective. One of the things we're going to get into is fifth generation warfare, but I suppose before we do that, because not everybody knows who Boone is, although Boone is very well known in his world. Boone, why don't you tell us a little about who you are and what you do, and then we'll dive into the more complicated stuff.
Man, that's a good question. Sometimes I don't even know. At the end of the day, I'm just a guy who kind of runs around trying to ring the bell to warn people of things that are happening. I've been doing it in the warfighter community for, better than a decade now. Talking about health related issues, talking about anything that's kind of coming down the pike that can be helpful, and also putting out the warning saying, hey, did you know that these medications are doing this to you? Did you know that not having a sleep study is going to affect you this way, that way? But also my background, primarily comes from, and the communication skills, a lot of it comes from my experience in the psychological operations community. I mean, that's what I did in the military for a good part of it, and that's what I did in Iraq. And it's something that was just very natural for me. That whole all those techniques and everything is just very natural for me. It's really part of my personality. And for people who know, it's not trickery. It's nothing like that. It's just understanding what's in front of you,
Right.
and understanding what intentions people are having or entities are having that may not be the most, shall you say, transparent. And that's really what the game is all about, and understanding what's behind the curtain. So that's what I'm doing nowadays. And right now I'm ringing the bell on fifth generation warfare and
Yeah.
polarization, dehumanization, tribalization. All these things that are happening, not just in our country but around the world. We've taken covert action and covert influence to a new level. It's happening in the United States. People don't recognize it for what it is, but everybody feels like there's something wrong. Like, hey, there's just something ain't right, but nobody's putting their finger on it's not right because of X. And I'm trying to explain what that X is all about.
For sure, for sure. You said a lot of great things. Let me just say this to everybody. If you're watching the Break It Down show, here's your chance to subscribe. Just click on the link below and it'll just subscribe on YouTube. And that's the best way to support me. The next best way is to go to the PayPal link, which you see scrolling across the page. Go to breakitdownshow.com, hit PayPal, and then just invent your own subscription. You want to do $5 a month, $25 a month. There's all kinds of people doing this. It helps me out. It gets me on the road. It puts gas in the tank. It helps me buy new cameras and all this equipment that I use up by working it hard. That's how you can support me. We don't make a lot of money around on the show, but we do get things paid for because you all dip into your pockets, and I appreciate that. So help support old Pedro so I can talk to people like Boone and give you guys access to these incredible people who you might not otherwise hear from. So that's my pitch to you all. And then also
Hey,
on the
hey, brother,
breakdown,
can I jump in on that? Because people have to
please.
understand, it's not just Pete sitting there in his backyard in a tent. He's out there hustling the information.
Oh
And,
yeah.
like we met recently in San Diego, and a lot of this conversation came up, but it wouldn't have happened had Pete not been like, yeah, man, let's get together. Let's meet. It's a thing when you have a show that people think, oh, you just hop on and you talk. No, there's a tremendous amount of prep. There's a
Yeah.
tremendous amount of your own personal time, your own personal past experiences that go into the show. And it's not just 1 hour a week, 2 hours a week. For every hour you're going to do on air, you're probably going to spend a good 3-4 hours of
Oh my
prep
God.
just so
Yeah.
you can get on air and
If
make sure you
only
know
if
what you're
only
talking
that, right?
about.
And I
Yeah,
do
it's
4 or 5
so
shows a week.
my hat goes off to you, brother.
I'm doing 4 or 5 shows a week too, right? And I'm trying to get on the road. I'm working on the logistics now to go to the border again this summer and go talk to the folks that live down there and get the scoop. And look, here's the reason why I do this is because the vice president was given the task by the boss, said, "Hey, go down to the border and figure things out." She didn't go, So I'm like, "Hey, no political commentary there. I'll go. Let me go show you guys what's going on." And this is part of this fifth generation warfare. And then I would say that we're like as a modern era, we're not sure what it is, but that's also coming. So the, and I don't want to conspiratorial, but we've already lost sight of the fact that the election, no matter who won the presidential election, the other side would have cried foul. That's 100% true. And there would have been investigations and lawsuits and everything else. But because we've moved on, we've lost track that a lot of that process is still going on. The movie 2000 Mules, it punches holes in a lot of theories. There's court cases that continue to evolve and to challenge things. And whether you want it to be true or not, for a lot of the nation, half, 40% of the nation, there is a problem with voter integrity and election fraud, right? There's a problem there. Maybe you don't think personally it's not, but wait till you lose an election and you're like, there's fuckery going on, right? So these conversations are happening, and this is part of this fifth generation and this affect over effect conversation that we should have.
Yeah, I mean it's everywhere, and it's you're talking about this fifth generation warfare, and are we there? How's it? Is it evolved beyond that? It absolutely has evolved beyond, I think, what the original conception of what fifth generation warfare would be looking like. It would be looking like cyber. It would be looking like unrestricted warfare at its best. Good, a lot of propaganda, a lot of media, all this stuff. But I think we're taking it even. I think it's even deeper than that. I think that process probably started a good 10 years ago. And now it's so much deeper. The psychographics that are gained from social media, segmenting audiences and then appealing to them based upon what their susceptibilities and vulnerabilities are. That micro messaging effect is happening, and it's happening at a very, very micro level. And it actually becomes, at some point in time, it becomes a chess game, within people's countries. And I'm not even going to say, it's one country working against another country. I mean, countries are, by and large, people think of them as an apparatus to manage a country and all this other stuff. Well, as part of that management, bottom line is countries are pirates. They're pirates. Okay. They are pirates on a ship looking to overtake, they're trying to get the booty, man. That's what it's all about. And I'll give you a good example. Uganda, 53 megatons of gold they just found. And the next thing you know, the U.S. comes out and says, hey, the guy who found all that stuff is a criminal. He's been exporting it to the wrong people. And then shortly after, guess what? There's an Ebola breakout. Then shortly after that, China is sending people to Uganda to help with an Ebola breakout. I think that has a lot to do with them, possibly, nobody's going to let Uganda become the richest country on the planet. It's just not going to happen. There's too many pirates out here. But it's that level. It's within our own country. I mean, again, it's sad that we have to say, hey, we're not trying to be conspiratorial. We're talking facts. I mean, look at the food distribution centers that have been shut down. These are all things that we would do in other places if we were trying to get an effect on the populace. Look at the supply chain breakdowns. Look at all these cattle that were killed in the heat. I mean, I'm pretty sure it wasn't any hotter than other summers. I don't know if that's relatable to anything, but it's something to definitely concern. Look at some of the people that are managing our country and where they're not focusing. And why not? Because it's an issue. You talked about the border. I went down to the border, and it was I thought people were bullshitting. I really did. I thought, blown out of proportion. They're just anti-Biden, dude, I went down there. It was crazy. I made a video. They've got these, you find them everywhere. There's these little bracelets, like you get when you go into a concert, and they're numbered. And these are what they're putting on children to traffic them across the border. I mean, little tiny things like you couldn't get they're not the size to get around a normal wrist is what I'm saying. So, I mean, there's all kinds of stuff that's happening out there. Look at the riots that are happening. Those are contrived. I guarantee you they're contrived. Look at, all of it. It's isms and ists. They're all uniting. And this is part of that generation, that fifth generation warfare. Whenever you put on your social media, what comes down your feed, look at Moonshot CVE. Moonshot CVE openly says, yes, we're controlling what you see when you do a search on the internet, but it's only towards one segment of people. Right. So all these things are happening, and people really have to protect themselves. And the worst thing they can do is think, oh, I'm not susceptible to that. Believe me, as a United States Army PSYOPer, you have susceptibilities and vulnerabilities.
Yeah.
Every single person out there, I don't care who you are, it's there. And the worst thing we can do to ourselves is tell us that we're not susceptible, that we're not vulnerable, that we're smarter than the situation. Because believe me, man, there's people out there who are huge entities with amazing resources, and I really think we don't know what we've gotten ourselves into at this point, and we better figure it out and figure out how to protect ourselves at the same time.
Yeah, it's true. And let me just back up for a second too, and just say this: if you want to understand like the power of what Boone is talking about, if um, if we could do our deployments again, if Boone and I rolled around together, because human counterintelligence folks and psyopers, they should be rocking the same patrols because we're working the same problem from different angles, right? I'm trying to break us into new people so I can find out where the influences are, find the bad people, figure out what bad things are going to do. And as I'm doing that, Boone is like we overlap in a lot of ways where he's trying to find the right messaging to create. How do we, how do we look? People talk about hearts and minds. That's probably dumbed down quite a lot from what Boone does. But as we're trying to win this war, this affect, right? We need a response to the stimuli that we create. And so we're trying to find the right stimuli, the right pathways. Is it working? And so I'm sort of measuring, he's sort of measuring it, and this is how these things go. And so when we see these things, we begin to see a pattern in behavior. And I'll tell you right now, and I already know Boone's going to agree with me on this. When you see something like the State Department and Department of Defense going out and picking these causes, picking these problems, and reporting their success, and then Boone and I aren't on a patrol, and Boone and I have never been on a patrol together, but if we would be looking around being like, this is a bunch of bullshit. This isn't happening like they're saying. And then the things that get reported, for example, they'll say like in the news right now, that becomes sensationalized. If you were to just do a study of like the top 3 problems socially for the last 20 years, you would just see this cacophony of things that we never really solved or dealt with. We just careen from problem to problem. This is very similar to what we saw in combat. We're like, it's going to be the V-bid this month. It's the suicide bomber. It's schools, whatever. And it would, like, the initiatives would change so fast. You never slow down to say, didn't we do schools 6 months ago? And then why are we asking the same questions? Why are we working the same problems if we dealt with it? Because the last unit, they said they dealt with it. And we see these same patterns today where, okay, we know that mass shooters draw eyeballs. And so you see everything categorized as a mass shooter. You see the standard. Look, if we think...
Brother, can I just... I hate to interrupt you, but I got to just throw this out there. The mass shooter situation... Okay, if you have an untrained and unarmed group near a mass shooter, they're not there to take out the shooter. They have no reason to be in the kill zone, okay? And we keep keeping these kids in the kill zone. Like who comes up with this plan? We're going to barricade in the kill zone. Go fuck yourself. If all of a sudden 400 kids start running in different directions and don't stop for a mile, you know how hard it is? These people can't hit a moving target. Just tell the kids, go run home in the opposite direction of the gunfire. Get them out of the kill zone. We leave them in the kill zone, and then we create containment of the kill zone, and the shooter just runs amok. I mean, this happens over and over and over and over again. There is no reason, and I think it comes down to just this inability to... I think it's the Americans' way of, we're just going to stop everything, be in denial, and rely on the other people to save us. We've got to get out of that mentality. It's nobody's job to save us but ourselves. And if you're not going to... Do I think arming schools and locking schools down is a thing to do? Well, yeah, that's maybe that's not the answer. Maybe there's a hybrid out there. But I think then we start creating this institutionalized perspective of education by kids. They end up going into a safe area that really looks like a prison. I don't think that's necessarily the positive thing anyway, especially since it's not, this is something that obviously is tragic, but it's not happening in every city, in every town, in every state across the country. And I think if we just start, my point is, I don't care who you are, whether you're a young person, an old person, whether you're prior military, whether you are a police officer, whether you're a doctor. If you are unarmed and untrained, your only friend is distance from the shooter. That's it. You've got to create distance and get the fuck out of the kill zone. I don't know why we keep teaching these kids to stay in the kill zone. It's an act of denial.
So let's dive into this a little bit. So one of the things that we know is that we instantly go to let's do something about the access to guns, and then you and I know, like, hey, it's not, you're behind the problem. right? The planner has all the advantage. Timothy McVeigh killed more kids than any school shooter has, and he didn't use a gun. He just blew the fuck
Yep.
out of a U-Haul truck with a bunch of poop and rocks and ignition source, basically. I mean, he made a homemade bomb. If you chose to, and you said, and again, because we have this prison mentality with our schools, if you chose to, you pick the right time of day, you go rent a truck from Home Depot, just drive it into the front of the school. I promise you it'll be sensational, and you will be like, now we have to push the gate further out. If you want to cause a ruckus in an airport, and these things, these are known problems. You want to cause a ruckus in an airport, you don't have to blow a plane up. You just walk in. Anybody can walk into the airport. Anybody can walk up to security, and especially if they're willing to die, and just right there, Allah Akbar, right there in the line. You go to Vegas on Sunday afternoon when everybody's leaving, boy, oh boy, you would devastate. So it's not the means, it's the fact that we don't have access to stop this person. And so when we look at that, like, and the other thing is how much of a problem is this, right? The law of diminishing returns is a real thing. So yes, school shootings are horrible, but it's a cultural thing, and you can't reliably legislate that out of existence because it's already illegal to do. You're just going to make it more and more illegal, and that, well, maybe that's the path. So I'm going to finish here in a second.
And here's where we take that turn back to where the conversation was. You know,
Yeah.
when we're out in the field, like we're in Iraq or Afghanistan or any of these places, you're collecting intel. I'm collecting information to give it to you to turn it into intel. Then it's feeding back, and I'm trying to determine what best way to communicate, and also what acts might be effective against that target audience. And it's after a testing process and all these things, it's kind of arduous. But at the end of the day, when you're seeing all these things that you're seeing in the news, every one of them is a act. Okay. It's there to change an attitude to drive a behavior. And you see how effective it is. I mean, you really do. I mean, we know by historical law, by history in and of itself, that you take away all the guns from the people, that's when a lot of really bad killing happens. It just does. And that's not going to change because people really don't change. You know, the only thing that changes is the technological platform that we exist on. People aren't any different now than they were 100 years ago. We just live on a different technological platform. So it's not going to change. There's going to be tyrannical people. Whenever there is someone in power, first of all, they've done a lot of things to get in power. And second of all, they don't give it up very easily. They never want to. So, that's kind of the check and balance. And anybody who says they're against we need to change the Second Amendment, they don't realize that they're telling people we need to change our Bill of Rights. It's not just the Second Amendment. The Second Amendment is part of the Bill of Rights. So how do you say, I could change one of our amendments within the Bill of Rights, but the other ones are protected? No, you're either for the Bill of Rights or you're not. There's no way around that. And I just don't think that's being argued effectively. But again, when you see these actions that are taking part in our country, they're taking part in other countries too. It's not just countries that are pirates. Big corporations are pirates. They're countries in and of themselves. And they conduct these operations as well. I guarantee you they conduct these operations because they're trying to make money. They're pirates, okay? Countries are pirates. So what you have is you have the populace, you, me, our neighbors, our family members that are affected by all these things, and we're just trying to live our damn lives. Meanwhile, everybody's treating us like we're their property that they get to manipulate whenever they want to. And if you think you're not susceptible or vulnerable to these things, again, you're living in a dream world. What you have to do is accept where you are susceptible, accept where you are vulnerable, shore up your weaknesses, and be aware that's where you're going to get, for lack of a better term, attacked.
That's great stuff, man. I want to back up to the school shooting thing and talk about look, we're a couple of combat guys. You're 100% right. Get those kids off the X, right? By the way, you and I both know how hard it is to be skilled enough to take on a school shooter. So you don't need a school resource officer. You don't need officer friendly. You need officer deadly as fuck. And that means some kind of carbine, it means body armor, it means constant patrols, it means two dudes. This isn't lady business. This is man business in this case. Could you train a lady to do it? Sure. But when you're talking about the person who's going to stop any threat that comes through, that's what you're talking about. You're also talking about $500,000 a year, for these guys to do this. They're constantly training. They're constantly getting injured and training because what they have to do is hard business, and that means the training has to be harder, right? And if we really wanted to go after rights and try to defeat school shooting, we would allow my peers on the signal side a lot more freedom to monitor a lot more of our stuff and err on the side of, we know we're going to put innocent people in jail, but we're never going to have another school shooting because we're going to go after people. And we have to accept these things, right? So whether you go after a gun, which, kind of, that left the horse left the barn a long time ago. They burned down the barn. They put up a Starbucks. There's no barn there anymore. So it's kind of too late to stop the guns, right? But if we were to give up our privacy, if we were allowed to have, look, and $500,000 a year per school to have nothing ever happen through that person's entire career. That's really what you're talking about, right? But if every kid's life is that valuable, then that's what you have to do, right? That is a prescription that is much more effective. You're not going to have a bunch of look, cops in Uvalde don't have the time, they don't have the budget to train to be able to go invade a school and walk out with a dead killer and no dead kids. They just don't.
And they're not soldiers. That's the thing.
That.
I mean, no offense to them, but they're not operators.
Right.
They're not soldiers.
Business.
Yeah, that's a whole other business, America. That is a whole other business.
So if we aren't talking about these actual tactical realities, why aren't we? I'm not the only guy who can make this stuff up. I know what it takes. You want to protect kids, you want to put a badass in school, you have to put a badass in school and accept that over the entire career of that kid's life, that operator's life, he's not going to shoot at anybody because this isn't really a major social problem. There are problems that kill a lot more people all the time, but because we love school, oh my God, right now, this is where I wanted to get to. It goes back to the border, right? China is openly importing fentanyl. Mexico is allowing them to do that.
It's being shipped north by the cartels with every person who's coming across. Again, right. This is a PSY act. Everybody listen, America. This is another PSY act. There are several PSY acts. Go look it up. PSYACT. Go look it up. Look at the definition. And then things are going to start to become more clear to you because they're driving attitudes, changing behavior. And ultimately, I hate to say it, but all these things are going to create chaos to the point that we lose confidence in our government, which would be a major objective for any other country, for the populace to lose confidence in their government. And we're moving towards that direction. And these things are not by accident. These are absolutely contrived. They're absolutely part of a plan. And again, if anybody out there listening to the sound of my voice thinks you're not susceptible and vulnerable to this, you're hurting yourself. Identify your susceptibilities, identify your vulnerabilities, and shore them up, and realize that's the open door that the enemy is going to come through. And if you're not going to cover down on that open door, they're just going to walk right in every single time. I guarantee you, because I would do that. Okay, I would do that. That's what I would do.
Right.
You're talking to the guy who, like, you ever see those shows where a guy goes to prison for burglary and then he comes out and he tells everybody how to not have their house burglarized? Yeah. Okay, I'm that guy. Okay, except from the PSYOP community. Yeah, I'm telling you how you're about to get fucked.
Well, and it's the same thing for me, right? Like my job is to go find the nastiest fuckers I can find and make friends with these guys and figure out how to influence them and, report on these things. But I'm also looking for the things that are really killing that commander every day. It's not threat based, right? Like in terms of modern combat, because if it was, the Taliban would have lined up in a line and we would have killed them. Taliban don't want to get killed by tanks and helicopters. What they want to do is walk around in tiny teams and only work during the months they want to work, but have the ultimate influence. The minute we left that valley, right, and then went back to our headquarters, the Taliban had all the control. And so the commanders would always come in, and these guys are fantastic warriors. They know what they're doing in terms of threat and danger and combat, right? But they could never mask their enemy to where they could go and eliminate them, right? And so guys like you and I were like, hey, dude, stop trying to do that. Stop trying to push the Taliban south and encircle them, because that ain't working. What do we need to do what else can we do, right? And then that's what gives us the insight on, you're approaching this thing from the front and with your big ball of fists. It's like, if you're going to go get into a fight and the Rock is standing in front of you, I promise the best action is not to run straight at the Rock and go try to outpower him, right? You're going to do something. I
promise you.
This is what Boone and I specialize in.
Well, it's about identifying centers of gravity. and then, neutralizing, disrupting, or just completely, decimating them. But, if I always use the example of, if I want to make a cake, I'm not a baker at all. I can't cook shit. I can barely boil water, but I can go to the store and I can pull a cake mix off the shelf. And if it says add water, add egg, I can make a cake. Okay. If those are the only two things I have to do.
Yeah.
Well, if I go home and I start making that cake, well, if all of a sudden I take the egg out, I don't have a cake. If I take the powder out, the cake mix, I don't have a cake. If I take the water out, I don't have a cake. So let's assume all these ingredients are centers of gravity. Okay. There are ingredients that create insurgencies that if you remove those ingredients, you no longer have a cake. You no longer have an insurgency. So it's about it's not about, we're not, little green guy armies have been gone a while now, where you just get force on force and go fight it out and launch artillery at each other. That's kind of hasn't been the game for a while. The game has been, a little bit more cloak and dagger, but with kinetic effects. And so you have to remove the centers of gravity. And I think by and large, that's where law enforcement is having a lot of problems in our country, is they keep trying to deal with a crime, not the centers of gravity that the person committing the crime have available to them. And I think this, as things progress, hopefully sooner than later, and I think you will see it. I've seen it happen, with different agencies. They are starting to look at things as a hybrid, say, like, for instance, if you've got money laundering happening at barbershops, right? And that money being laundered is going to purchase weapons or drugs or all this other thing for resale. Well, then what you want to do is you want to, some regulatory agency needs to be in those barbershops 3-4 times a week, just disrupting it. And so they have to find another way to do what they need to do, and so it's things like that I think are coming more online, and they really have to, if we're talking about the, people coming across the border. Okay, well, they have to move. Transportation is an issue. If they got on the other side of the border and all of a sudden there was no transportation available, it would cause a bottleneck and it would disrupt those actions. So it's looking for the ingredients that are causing the problem and just moving them away so the problem can't exist anymore. That's kind of the game.
I would so part of this, I would say, not sixth generation, because I don't know that we can define it yet, but part of this newer generation where there's elements of the fifth and there's these new elements is that war has been democratized, right? I can go online and I can buy a scope and a computer, and I can reach a target effectively with not an assault rifle, yet has the same mechanics. I can reach that target 1.5 miles, 2 miles out, and you don't have to hit the target. This is an important thing. If someone's popping rounds at you in your car and they're not hitting near you, guess what you're doing now? You're like, holy shit, I'm getting shot at. And so even if you don't hit the target, you're effective, because that person is going to now change what they're doing, and it's going to cost. So you don't have to be successful in the attack to cause. So you can do that. You can buy a drone on Amazon that can carry 100+ pounds. You can buy a drone that can shoot 6,000 rounds a minute. It's tree seeds. It's a tree seed, but that can be converted into something else. There's drones that can shoot fire. And so anybody can do this. And one of the things that we can do really well, and this is going to get right back into your wheelhouse, Boone, is like, we're always talking about who's the person. Like, people trying to help me make the show go, like, who's your person, right? And so you can literally make a profile, and you may not nail it the first time, but you only got to be successful sometimes. And because you can mass blast out, you can look for people who are psychologically unstable and lean right or lean left or do whatever. And you can target those people with messaging fairly simply, right? You can do the calculus to do it, and you don't have to hit your mark very often, but you do need to weaponize 1 or 2 dudes a month, and all of a sudden, whole lot of chaos.
Bro, give me a chat room full of kids that are in angst, and let me find one of them that's on a certain regimen of drugs, of psych meds, and make friends with them. And it's, especially when they're disenfranchised, they're separated from their families, they don't feel a connection to anybody. I mean, just like you have these predators out there that lure young girls and young boys into sex trafficking, there are predators out there that are doing, the same type of thing, except it's not to lure someone into some sort of some sort of nefarious situation where they're going to be victimized, it's to encourage them to do things that they wouldn't otherwise do. And the susceptibilities, again,
Yeah.
if you're on the psych meds and you're having those just normal shit that the kids go through, I don't know when it became abnormal for kids to be depressed. I mean, that's part of growing up. It really is. It's that's how you learn how to cope with it when you get older in life. But everybody's trying to save kids from that, and really, it's just learning coping strategies. It's not saving anybody, but that's a whole other thing. But you know, again, there are folks out there, there are entities out there that are looking for susceptibilities and vulnerabilities, and just being able to put the pieces together. Give me somebody who's susceptible, get them fucking spun up, and then the next thing you know, you just find a way to put a firearm in their hand and put the idea in their head that this is, the way to do things, and for whatever reason that motivates them. And I'm pretty sure, technically, I believe that could probably happen.
Oh, it can for sure happen. And you don't have to be successful every time, right? You just need one or two. And then
No, you just need the news to report on it. That's it.
That's right. And even by not getting 100% success, you're still moving people towards this thing. And we know already that and look, this is going to sound conspiratorial, but it's not. So we know that our software, our internet, all of these things, our social media things are designed to create that dopamine hit, that phone that we can't, like, put your phone down and walk away from it for 2 days. You'll go through withdrawals. You probably go run to it. We used to walk around all the time, Boone, no phone at all. No, not a care in the world about that kind of thing. Right. But we become addicted to it. And so you have kids that are addicted to games. And then you have someone in there just sowing those seeds of whatever it's going to be, whatever ideology, whatever it's going to be. That's fertile ground, because you're talking about addicted people, the addicted brain, and what it's willing to do. You can, over the internet, talk reliably and repeatedly, talk people into falling in love with you. You can automate it with a robot and say, I'm a sexy blonde. Yep. I have giant tits. Yep. Send me money. And people, every single day, you will find someone who will send you money.
Exactly. So why wouldn't you think you'd be able to corrupt somebody into committing an act of violence? I mean, I remember when the first person shooter games first became popular, probably, I don't know, 15 years ago now, probably longer. And I remember there were veterans that were coming out and saying, hey, wait, this is a bad thing. You're creating conditioned responses in kids that they shouldn't have in these first person shooter games. And I was like, oh, come on. Everybody knows a video game's a video game. I really wasn't buying it. But now I'm a little bit more into buying into it, because, you got a young person setting with a very unrealistic perspective of what war is. And they're always the winner. There's always a reset. There's never any blood. You don't actually have to lose any friends. And, it's a game. That's a susceptibility that can be leveraged. There's no doubt about it. And so, again, if you're going to look for that profile, what am I looking for? I'm looking for someone who's disenfranchised, who's young, who's probably on psych meds, plays a lot of first-person shooter games, has a fascination with wanting to be a hero or get some sort of revenge against society for them feeling lonely and sad. And the next thing you know, you're working 100, 200, 300 people at a time. You don't have to be successful, like you said. You just need to get them to do something and get the news to report on it. There's your psi act, and that's going to influence, certain objectives.
Those the reality of those shooter games and the tactics they teach, that stuff, you're also giving tactical knowledge to these folks that, again, they've never looked. When I was a kid, we played baseball in the park, pick up baseball, no parents around. And if you got lippy, you might get dotted in the eye. And then you'd have to play in baseball, because you'd have to stand up for yourself. You'd have to figure out how to get through that incident. That doesn't happen anymore. Kids don't hardly ever have that kind of interaction. So you live in this fantasy world. You learn how to infiltrate a house. You learn how to infiltrate a school. You learn how to pre-plan. You learn how to pick weapons and their capabilities and measure them against things. Again, you don't got to be successful. All you got to do is do it, because even the plan, even the act of the police saying, haha, we've caught this guy, is a news article and therefore a psi act.
Yeah, absolutely true. I was, golly, I forgot half of what I was going to say, but you made such a good point. Oh, the people who design these games, I mean, the folks who are the subject matter experts are really the experts. You know what I mean?
They really
They're
are.
really the experts. You're seeing what the best and the best can come up with and put it in game form. So and it's not like it used to be. It's not little stickmen running around. You know, you got to learn to pie a corner. You got to learn to look high. You got to learn to, what do you step on? Where are the tripwires? I mean, they've got a lot of stuff in those games now that most people wouldn't even be cognizant of it at a different time. Oh, I know what I was going to say. You're talking about growing up. Yeah, if you grew up in the 70s, 80s, maybe early part of the 90s, before everybody was locked down on these little screens all the time. Here's what I remember from the 70s and 80s. People used to put hands on each other. People used to throw hands a lot more often than they do now. A lot more often. And it was never considered a crime. It was just something that happened,
Boys will be
And
boys.
but here's the other thing I saw. Even though people used to put hands on each other, used to throw hands a lot more often, nobody was ever brutal. There was never brutality. It was that John Wayne thing. Okay, I won. Do you give? Okay, stand up. It was still that kind of thing still occurred. But now I see, videos of these kids when they get in schoolyard scuffles and stuff, they're truly brutal. I mean, they want to be the next MMA, winner, and they're doing this ground and pound, and they just brutalize the shit out of each other. So that whole culture has changed. It's picking on the weak and brutalizing them,
Yeah.
rather than two guys having a disagreement and throwing hands and working it out. They brutalize each other. And I just see that that's a difference. That's something that has to be acknowledged about our culture, and also the shootings. People are like, oh, instead of throwing hands, I'm going to lay in wait and shoot somebody, or I'm going to stab somebody, or the brutality level has gone up, and the fisticuffs has just come down. The level.
Yeah. There's another aspect too. I've seen some studies talking about the lack of sexuality with kids, and the normalization of violence and sex that we see. Because look, pornography is openly available on the internet, or all you have to do is type in on any search engine you want, whatever sexual act you want to see, and there will be videos right there of it. Anybody, 8 years old, whatever it is, they have open access to this, and it's messing kids up because they don't have a normal progression into sexuality, where like just having a girl touch your hand makes you lose your mind, or having a boy right back, whatever these gentle, tender things are, as you try to figure it's being ripped away and replaced with acts of sexual violence as a norm. And it's terrifying kids. When we were young, and again, this is like, wow, angry old man. But here's the thing: the society and the culture is changing, right? When we were young, you went to, if you were at all trying to be a normal kid, you went to school dances, and you wanted to go do these things. You wanted to hang out with your friends. You got nervous. You tried to figure out how to ask a girl out to dance. Or if you were a girl, you're like, oh my God, I'm going to stand there. Is anyone going to ask me to dance? And you were exposed, and it wasn't comfortable. And in the 7th grade, they're playing funk music, and you're like, how do I dance to this? I don't know. And so you're trying to figure all these things out, but you were there in the moment trying to do it. Well, you don't have to do that anymore. And you see fewer and fewer dances at schools. And then when they do dance, I know, like in my high school, there was like rules because the dancing was becoming so explicit. They had to like severely limit. And how do you define that? Like, you have to dance within a 3-foot circle. You cannot, there's like all these rules on how you could and couldn't dance.
It's because you were out there doing the windmill, weren't you, Pete?
That's right.
You were doing the windmill.
Oh yeah, I do all of them: windmill, worm, millipede, centipede. I do all of them.
The other thing,
normalizing the violence in these things, it is a change in society that we're having to deal with. And it does sound like a bunch of angry old dudes talking, but the reality is if you can desensitize people and collect these desensitized people, you can do things with them.
Yep, that's absolutely true. I remember, the big thing when I was a kid, we'd go to the mall. Where are you going to meet girls on the weekend? They're at the mall. And, they even had shows that they made, mall rats, I mean, they had shows that they built around it because that was the culture at the time. And you spend half a day figuring out how you're going to talk to the girl who worked at Heidi's Frozen Yogurt. I mean, that was the extent of, growing into, a sexual person, as adolescents. And now, these kids, they just go straight from, zero to freaky deaky, you know what I mean? There's no trying to figure out even how to talk to a girl. So I think it's making us a little weird, man. I think it's
It's
making us a
making us a
little
lot
weird.
weird. I growing up, I was in my 20s, and there was a pretty girl named Morgan. I remember this girl very clearly, and she probably was Indian, but she was very pretty. And I'm like, I'm gonna ask this girl out. She worked at a record shop, and I went in every day for a week, and I bought new CDs all the time. I chatted her up, and I finally got the courage to ask her out. And I think I shocked the shit out of her so much that I didn't play it right. She just instantly said no as a default, and I was like, ah, damn it! And then I walked out. And I never went back to that store to ask that girl out again. But I bet if I would have approached it differently, I would have got that date. The point being, not only did I have to like figure out and screw up this, and look, and I asked all kinds of girls out on dates. This girl, this made me a little bit more nervous than usual, but I had to figure that out. I had to have the confidence to do it, and this confidence that we lack, and this man, I'll tell you what, the lack of tolerance. You know, if we can learn to take look, intolerance is easy. It's a default behavior for humans. I don't like that. It's not what I do. Therefore, it's no good. It's bad. It's evil. Whatever it is, whether it's political, religious, community, whatever it is. And tolerance requires a callus. It requires some muscle. It's not comfortable to look at something. And you and I have looked at people that are odious people that are doing terrible things, and you have to sit there and say, this is this person's existence. I'm not trying to validate what they're doing, but I am trying to work here. And so I've got to work with this guy that has sex with young boys on Friday, that, you know, abuses his wives or whatever it's going to be. We had to get past that, because to get things done in the real world, you have to work with people you don't agree with.
I think that I think the sad part about it is that, or you know, hey, first of all, let's give a shout out to all the guys that do that hard work, because it's not everybody's cup of tea.
Yeah.
And whatever, you know, when you're doing that type of work, it's not like it ever goes away. I mean, you know, for as long as your memory exists, you're going to be, you know, constantly re-exposed to those memories, and that's not easy. And I think that's where a lot of respect for warfighters and law enforcement gets. People don't understand what they're respecting them for. They just feel like they should. Well, what you're really respecting them for is the fact that they're willing to carry memories that you weren't.
Yeah.
And, you know, that doesn't end when they retire. That doesn't end when they go home. And so they're carrying memories of things that you'll never know anything about. And so when you want to show your respect, you know, for people in those types of jobs, you know, define what you're really doing. You know, you're giving respect because they're going to walk around with memories that you'll never know exist.
Yeah, no, it's totally true. One of the things that goes with that is if you're a cop, you're seeing, I mean, every day, maybe half of your shift, depending on where you work, you're seeing the worst that humanity has to offer. You're seeing a person on the worst day of their life, whether they've done something horrible and now will regret. You're seeing all of this poison. And then you ask those guys, would you walk around unarmed after they've seen the worst in humanity? And I'll tell you right now, you're not going to find many cops who are like, yeah, I don't need a rifle every day. I don't need a pistol. It's no big deal. Those guys all, and operators too, they all, because they've seen the worst of humanity, they want to have a weapon at all times. When I walk through, look, I have a lot of empathy for homeless people and what they're going through and all their multitude of problems here in California. We've got a huge homeless problem, but I am on high alert, as if I'm walking through Mosul. And I'm like, someone is going to fucking attack me here because I have something that they don't have, or they are mentally ill. And I can't sort that out in an instant. All I can do is have not lethal action, hopefully, but be able to act at a level that they're not expecting and get the fuck out of that situation. So, and I don't have a gun on me, right? I don't walk around LA with a gun because I shouldn't need to. But I promise when I walk through those areas, it's just like combat for me. It's exactly the same thing. And to expect someone to expose, like to think you can put a policy in place without understanding where that person is, where they live in Del Rio County, Texas, right on the border where the worst of the crossings happen, and think that they can't arm themselves when there's people coming across with nefarious intent, or, you know, they turn what, I talked to the judge who runs the emergency response there, right in Del Rio County. And he said, the thing that keeps me up at night, I love to ask that question, what keeps you up at night? He's like, I worry that one of my fellow residents in Del Rio County will have to make a life and death decision and take someone's life. And I said, oh, because you'll have to sit in as the judge and maybe he's like, no, we'll take care of all that. But for the rest of their life, they have to deal with the fact that they had to take someone's life because they were on their property and they felt threatened. That's That doesn't work in Baltimore, or what other,
Yeah.
most of the rest of the nation. And so how can you, unless you're, I don't know. I don't know how you solve those problems with policy, but policy can't address that problem of Del Rio versus San Francisco. They aren't the same place.
No, they're not. Each one of them has a different, factor, different group of centers of gravity that can be disrupted. And again, that's the way you have to play this game. That's the most effective way, anyway. So I think that I think things will get better. They have to. But I think, again, people need to realize, again, whoever's watching, if you tuned in late, go look up the word PSYACT, PSYACT, and what it's all about. And then start putting that as the framework of things you're seeing, and then try and develop, okay, where is this pushing the behavior? And I'm not telling you what to think. I'm not telling you what to believe. I'm just giving you the tools so you can think and believe something in a more effective way. And I think you would agree, Pete. It's about, I think, one of the valuable things that guys like you and I do, and a lot of veterans in our country can do, is take the time to don't be a dick and just, everybody's an idiot and
Yeah.
no, take the time and explain things. Hey, listen, let me show you something that you may not be aware of, so you can be a more effective person for yourself and for your family and for your community. I think that's really something that, as the warfighter community, if we have a next mission right now that we can all kind of agree on, I think it's that one. And then let everybody make their own decisions. But let's shoulder a little bit more responsibility and give people the tools to do so.
Yeah, no, it's great advice. And do your own damn research. Get in the literature on whatever problem you think is important. Make sure you understand it, because the thing that Boone and I both have seen is that these are multivariate problems. You can go after a center of gravity. What if it's the wrong one? Because this stuff moves around and changes. And then I would say, in modern conflict that I've seen, the civil population is the center of gravity. And if you can knock that thing around and dominate it, boy, yeah, this is why the affect over effect thing works, right? If I can drive people crazy, if I can
Yep.
embolden them
You have
against
decision
the rest of the
dominance at
nation.
that point.
Right.
You have
Right.
total decision dominance at that point.
Right. Right. And that's what we're seeing a lot of. That's what a lot of our media is attempting to do. It's because it's trying to make money and wants eyeballs. If no one watches this show, hard to make money. But if I report on and I talk inflammatory things or salacious things about school shootings or about sex online or whatever it is, I'll draw a lot of people to me. The quality of my show would go down. I wouldn't have incredible people like Boone on talking, but that's what we're all competing for, right? Eyeballs, earballs, and affect. Can I drive these people to watch my stuff? We have, I love them. I'm guilty of this. We have on, at least on Channel 5 a lot, but a lot of other channels here in Southern California, if there's a car chase, they're going to play it for a long time. And then you're stuck. It's so addicting. You just watch it and you're like, what's going to happen?
It's the ultimate what happens next.
Yeah.
What's going to happen next? It's the ultimate what's going to happen next, which is what humans are just drawn towards that. I mean, that's the whole life. Why are we afraid of dying? Because then we don't know what's going to happen next. Yeah. That's a human factor. But yeah, you're going to see, it's just going to be a draw. And I think that, I hope that people can, take that aspect of human nature, what's going to happen next, and have that curiosity and build off of what we're talking about on this show. Go learn about what is fifth generation warfare, what is unrestricted warfare, who conducts these type of operations, what are corporations, what's their piece of the pie in this whole thing. Countries and corporations really are pirates. That's what they are. They act like pirates, and they're not going to let other pirates be a more powerful pirate. And so I hope that people take that curiosity that is human nature from this show and go research and look at the stuff we're talking about. Go look up Moonshot CVE, find out what that's all about. When you're doing research, don't just go to the first 5 things that pop up, because that's usually contrived. Scroll back about 4 pages, when you're doing the research. Doing searches. If you search with a phrase that you would use, you're going to get a bunch of people talking about the things you talk about the way you talk about it. Learn to use the word versus. Like if I'm trying to find out, about a medication, back pain versus CBD. Okay, well, then I'm just pulling everything that's back pain and CBD. I'm not just does back pain help CBD? Because somebody already loaded what you're going to see on that search when you phrase it that way. So there's a lot of little tiny things that people can do. Learn what a scheme is. Pull up the Psychological Operations Handbook, or just find scheme. What is a scheme? And it's source, content, audience, media, and effects. Once you learn how to scheme things that you're reading or looking at, you can judge whether or not it's something that's credible, whether or not it's something that is there for you, or something that's there to create some sort of hype to drive behavior, and it's attached to some sort of psyop. So that's another thing everybody can look up, is SCAME, SCAME, as part of the psyop continuum. And it's a way to do counter propaganda and determine messaging and stuff like that. But it all works in our current existence, in our current country, in our current world. And everybody just kind of needs these things. No different than you need a lock on your door. No different than you arm yourself in weird situations. We're in an era right now where you have to have these tools to protect your mind, because that's where the battlefield is.
There's a great point about this, and then we're going to change gears a little bit. But there was a story about it wasn't hugely reported. Certainly wasn't top of the news, but the USA Today had a reporter that's been fired because they filed dozens of false reports. These are people making shit up, and in that field, in the report, we trust reporters. And here's one of the most reliable news media organizations, and they've got a person that they just had to fire. And if there's one, that's 100. That's how these things work. And so we have these news organizations that are revered. New York Times is not immune to this either. And they're literally printing bullshit. And then when they have to go back and correct that bullshit, sure, they legally oblige, but they're not like, hey, we were printing bullshit. Anytime this person said something, it was a lie. They don't do that. They satisfy the legal requirement and go back to inventing things. I mean, this is why there's a lack of trust in media, because they've and look, you talk to a lot of old time reporters. They're like, yeah, man, it's these younger people, right? This newer generation, what they're driven to do. I've been offered jobs working for a lot of very well-known companies where they're like, well, what we want to do is find things that respond well on Twitter, or create content based upon what's trending on Twitter, so that we can be part of that conversation. Instead of creating your own unique content that drives people crazy in a great way, they're purposefully trying to leverage these things. You see this all the time too in media, where they put like completely random tweets in to confirm a bias in there. And it's like this, it's a disgusting form of news that is not making us a better country.
Here's where the feedback loop happens. And what do you call a reporter? You call that a target, right? I mean, if I want to put out information a certain way, the same way we're talking about co-oping young people and psych meds and everything else, if I can find a reporter that's susceptible, you can feedback loop them, with everything they see on their computer, and the next thing you know, they're reporting on something that you want to report on. The media right now, the big media, whether it's cable television or whatever, they're drawing their metrics from social media, which is completely contrived. Yeah. So you have an entire media apparatus, social and, television, whatever, that's contrived. And right now it's contrived at the 51%. It's geared towards the 51% of the most socialist Democrats. That means 49% of Democrats and most conservatives are kind of on the same sheet of music. I mean, they're going to have the things that they always argue about, but it's not this stuff that's way over here. Yeah. And the psyop is that they want you to believe, whoever they are, they want you to believe that 51% of the most socialist Democrats is the majority audience. And it's not the majority audience. Yeah. And that's the game right now. And everybody needs to understand that is not the majority audience. The vast majority of people, whether on the right, the left, however, they agree on the same stuff. I mean, yes, things like abortion, things like how far should the Second Amendment go? Those things between the right and left have always existed. They're always going to exist. Entitlements, that's always existed. But this other side, the 51% of the most socialist Democrats, that is not the majority audience. And they're trying to split us, make us more polarized. Right. that's all part of the game, man. I just hope people start to recognize it. I've been screaming about it for about 10 years, but I'm hoping people are starting to recognize it a little bit.
Yeah, the abortion conversation is interesting because if you have a person who's pro-life, right, they will not rest until life is completely 100% protected, and they determine where life begins. I think a lot of us would say, "Hey, I'm not cool with an abortion at say 1 year old or at the moment of birth." Like we need to find a time well before that because the mom has a choice, but has a responsibility as well, right? And I think that's where the big conversation is when does that work and what are the exceptions? Then on the pro-choice side, which is really pro-abortion, they want no restrictions, right? They want it to be all about choice, and then it denies the rights of both the men, the fathers, and it also denies the right of the zygote, the fetus, the baby, right? And so we're trying to sort these things out. These are not black and white propositions, by the way. There's no
These are
there's no
things that have been
moral high
push and
ground.
pull in our country forever.
Yeah.
And it's going to continue to be push and pull. But the same folks that are having these arguments, the more centrist of them, they pretty much get along,
Yeah.
and it's funny, we're talking about when we were kids, people used to throw hands a lot more, but they weren't brutal. And the other thing that used to happen when we were kids, there's two things you didn't talk about at a party: religion and politics. You just didn't do it. And now that's all anybody talks about is religion and politics, and the world is a more brutal place. I mean, these are lessons that I think as you get older, we're talking about, yeah, we're the old guys now. But, what are the old guys? The old guys are some guys who have seen some stuff and they know
Yeah.
how to apply knowledge. That's what wisdom is, the ability to apply knowledge. And that's what I see. I think it's what you see. And, hopefully people will think that through a little bit.
I don't want to keep hammering you the whole time. Do you want to ask me any questions? I know we kind of been back and forth in this, but we don't often get to talk. So what do you want to ask me?
Yeah, let me think. You talk to a lot of people. You're doing multiple shows a week. You've been doing this a while. You got a whole lot of shows in your inventory right now. Over the years, and as you're talking to people now, are you seeing, as someone who's reporting on things, who's going out getting content, who gets great guests, are you seeing people kind of opening up and becoming aware of this unrestricted warfare, fifth generation warfare, the SIACs that are happening? Are you seeing more of an awareness, or is it just more of I feel like something's going on more than I used to, but I can't name what it is. I mean, where was it when you started and where is it now as far as awareness level?
I think the thing I'm more aware of than anything else that I can, and it's not so much fifth generation warfare, although I do write and talk and think about warfare a lot on the show and personally, but the pendulum seems to be swinging back in terms of what we're willing to accept in our day-to-day lives. The truths that are being put out versus like you see parents standing up to racist ideals being put forth in school. We're understanding that you and I both know this. You go somewhere else and you'll see what happens if you're openly gay. Go try that in, I don't know, 85% of the other countries in the world, right? This isn't a bad place. And I think people are getting a little bit fed up with being told that they're bad people and being assigned some kind of evil outcome, racism or some kind of phobia. I don't have an unrealistic fear of trans people. I'm just not, that's not me at all, right? But that'll be assigned to me based upon me walking in the door, and I think people are more and more fed up with that, and they don't want to be preached to, and they don't want to be assigned evil. So I think that has begun to change. Here's the thing: is that there's no other side that's reliable. When the pendulum swings, there's nothing that's going to catch the pendulum because it's the right thing. It's just going to go in the other direction, whatever direction that is, for a while, and that isn't right and left. It's just where the pendulum goes, and there will be bullshit going in that direction. The thing that I try to capture probably more than anything else on the show is just the beauty of what we are as people. Sometimes we got to talk about hard stuff like we're doing today, but sometimes we get to talk to people who build wonderful lives on YouTube, talking about, I got a dude coming on later this week. His focus is tractors on YouTube, and he talks about how to work a tractor, how to upgrade a tractor and shit like that. That makes you smile just like you just did, right?
It does.
I got a
I need
dude
more of that in my life.
Right. I got a dude on my who lives just a couple miles south of me. His second generation surfboard shaper, and he can make anything out of anything. He made his own camper trailer, right? And that dude is incredible. His last name is Martin. You guys can look him up. Look up Martin Shapes on Instagram. And so that's more of what I do is I try to be a beacon of something besides what the bullshit is. And if I do cover topical things like school shootings, we don't say banal stuff that just drives clicks. We talk about, hey, this is really hard. You think you're a teacher and you're going to become tactically proficient? You're talking to a dude that can't do that. And I'm pretty fucking badass. You put a pistol in my hand, and you get in a gunfight, you better look the fuck out, right? However, do I want to get into, and I always say this, and Boone, you'll get this. If you want to see how hard it is to shoot and be around kids, try to hit a target with the pistol and be at, I don't know, 30 feet, and now walk in place when you try to make that shot happen. You're not going to be able to hit something walking in place, and your heart is beating. It's the same thing as walking in place. You're going to tell me that some history teacher is going to have the time to become proficient with a pistol? That's bullshit. And so we look for like,
that's why we got to get these kids off the X, because they got a better chance of survival. I mean, every step away from the kill zone is a greater chance at life. And, you know, when you've got somebody that's only 3 feet tall, they're getting smaller by the minute, by the second, as they're moving away from you. That's a hard target to hit. And if you've got 50 of them doing the same thing, you're not going to hit any of them. You know, it's very, I'll put it this way. You're going to hit a hell of a lot less than if they're just hunkered down in a classroom, not moving at all, and you're in the classroom with them. Yeah. Get the kids off the X. Let them run.
Let them run. Yeah, but that's my answer is that I don't think it's a political thing. I don't think that parties are the answer. And for those that think that we need a third party, go check out Iraq. They've got 100 parties and ain't no one happy.
It's not about the parties. It's about unfucking the party. Right now you have a uniparty. There's not even parties. There's a uniparty. And it's the RNC and the DNC. And they've got the same objectives. They're just tickling your fancy a little bit different.
Yeah, no, it's true. Well, listen, I don't want to take any more of your time. I burned up a battery even. I was talking for so long with you. What do you want to say in closing before I shut this thing down? Great comment.
Brother, you know what? It's not about me, man. It's about us. And it's about having good conversations that are intellectual. It's not about, you know, motherfucking anybody. Everybody's got their frame of reference. We just saw that with Juneteenth. You know, I think people need to understand other people's frame of reference, and generally, it's got nothing to do with being ill or negative against anybody else. It's just their frame of reference. So, you know, learn other people's frame of reference and be accepting of that, and allow them to understand yours, and stay away from polarization. Polarization is the enemy. You know, you start with polarization. Then you go to tribalization, then you go to dehumanization, and then comes killing. This is the same arc that happens throughout history. And if you're part of that polarized group, which you probably are, you're on that arc, and you're going to tribalize, which means you're only going to hang out with your people. And then your people are going to look at the other tribes, and they're going to dehumanize them because they're not like you. And then it's very easy to make people kill each other. So you got to stop with the polarization. You really do. You just got to stop with it.
Hey, Glenn, I love the comment. I don't mind your dissent. I'm just saying that if you think a history teacher can run a pistol well enough to be in an active shooter situation, you're going to have to convince me. I'm going to have to see it with my own eyes, because that stuff is hard to do. And
nobody rises to the occasion. They default to their training.
Yeah, right. And you know how long it takes. Look, to be a good psyoper, you cannot be a good operator at the same time. Like, yes, and I mean like a guy who drives a gun for a living, right? To be an 18 Bravo or that we're kicking SEAL, to do your job, it's too hard to do, to leave any training on the ground. That means other stuff. Do you have to be proficient with your basic tasks? Yeah. Do you want to be able to shoot so you're respected in your team? Yeah, of course. But to do that, to teach history well, and to also be able to defend kids at a moment's notice when you never know when it's going to happen. Sorry, that is too high of a hurdle. It takes too much.
That's Hollywood, man.
That is Hollywood. That is Hollywood. Man, I love what you're saying. I love all these things. We are working together. Let's continue, you and I, to do that. And everybody in general, lighten up a little bit and work on your own stuff.
Lighten up, Francis. It ain't that hard.
Lighten up, Francis. Yeah.
Lighten up, Francis.
All right, stand by for 1 second. All right, thanks, everybody. Hey, thanks for watching the show. I really appreciate it. Right here, you can subscribe. Please do that. It makes the show grow. Hit that notification bell so you know which incredible guest is coming up next. Down below is the PayPal link. You can put a small subscription in. That is an enormous help. All that money goes right back into the show. And then right up over here are the next episodes you should listen to, curated by yours truly. Thank you so much.